Hello? Okay. Okay, got it? Okay. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Cardozo Law School Forum on Bias in New York. It's hopefully going to be our last one, but I'm just idealistic. We do have a serious problem in this country and in this city, in this era that we're in, with bias, not only as relates to incidents of bias, that is attacks, violent attacks, but also as relates to many other aspects of our society, including employment, housing, every aspect that you can imagine. Our society is affected by bias, whether it be ethnic, racist bias, or bias against gays and lesbians, or bias against women. We have in place right now a hierarchy, whether it's de facto or de juris, of discrimination. And hopefully, with your presence here today, we can put a cornerstone in the foundation of something in this state that can help to resolve it. And although right now we don't have the quantity of people that we need, we do have the quality of people that we need. And I look around and I see a diverse group of people here, and you're definitely coming from other schools, different parts of the city, and a diverse group of people even within our school. So I'm really happy for us all that you're here. I want to, before I introduce the first speaker, I want to mention that an event this week that occurred. March 19th, 1990 was the birthday for somebody. This young man would have been 17 years old on March 19th, 1990. He was in the prime of his life back in August when he entered a forbidden zone and went to look for a car. And because his skin is dark, he was shot down. And his name was Yusef Hawkins. And I was very hurt seeing that happen in a city that I think has a lot of hope for people to live in who are from diverse cultures and backgrounds. And as an Italian American, I take a special care to note that not all of us will act in the manner that the Italian Americans acted in Bensonhurst. And in fact, one of our speakers later on represents that district in the New York State Assembly. His name is Frank Barbaro, and he's an example of the progressive tradition in Italian American culture. That is just one aspect of what we've seen in our state and in our society. There are many incidents throughout the country. I don't have to go through them now, whether they be letter bombs or whether they be a judge in Houston, I believe it was Houston court, saying that it was okay to kill a gay man because we don't really need them, something to that effect, and acquitting a murderer on those grounds. Without getting into much else, I just want to note lastly, before I go into my first speaker, is the irony that we saw a month ago with the death of Malcolm Forbes. He died within a week of the anniversary of the assassination of another Malcolm. His name was Malcolm X. And the difference in the way the society looked at it is, I think, a testimony to the grave situation that we're in. Malcolm Forbes was a very wealthy man. He held parties all over the world. He has a building across here that has a magazine across the street. He really epitomized greed, selfishness, and some of the more negative aspects of our society to me. He might have done some charitable things. He may have done some good things for society. But then again, how many of you saw a real story about who Malcolm X was in terms of where he started out in life and where he ended up in life? He started out in a small home in the Midwest in which his family was burned out of by a white racist gang who came in and shot up the home, and he was burnt out of that home. He grew up in poverty and within this racist culture, and overcame that to become one of the greatest orators of our time and truly a world leader. And although he did express a lot of rage and a lot of anger, and we all have as human beings on this, and you may say that's one of the reasons he was shot down, but he is a completely misunderstood person, and a person that I think all of us, no matter what aspect of society we come from, should take more notice of, instead of just the wealthy, extravagant people. Our first speaker today is a very wonderful person who I have the pleasure of being in a class this semester called Feminist Jurisprudence. And you may think, well, you're a guy, what are you doing in feminist jurisprudence? Well, that's the whole point. There is a lot of discrimination that a lot of men are indoctrinated into. We are set up into roles and ways of treating women and ways of treating ourselves that are very demeaning. And I have found a lot of personal satisfaction by sitting in Drusilla Cornell's class and listening to theories of empowerment, both for men and for women, because it is the other aspect of all of us, whether it be we live in a world of two sexes, and the empowerment of both, the empowerment of either is the empowerment of both. And I'm going to read a little thing from the student handbook here. I hope it's not too cliche, but I thought this would be a good way of making it an official introduction. Professor Drusilla Cornell is one of the nation's leading authorities on Hegel and legal theory. Professor Cornell was instrumental in organizing the groundbreaking 3-day conference on Hegel held at Cardozo in the spring of 1988. She has served on the faculty of the Joint Institute on Law and Critical Tradition held between Cardozo and the graduate faculty of the the New School for Social Research. If you could please welcome Professor Drusilla Cornell.
Perspective is the perspective that should count. push one side in an argument or one item in a group or a series. Prejudice, on the other hand, is an unreasoning opinion or like or dislike of something. Bias, in other words, and think about our colloquial use of speech, if you know that when someone's talking about their boyfriend, for instance, and they say he is the smartest, handsomest, most wonderful human being in the whole world, you say he or she is biased. Maybe even you say it in a humorous way. When you talk about prejudice, it says an unreasoned dislike for someone or a group. And then they give the example of quote-unquote racial prejudice. Now, questions of affirmative action, questions that in any way positively characterize minority groups or women are oftentimes now attacked as bias. The classic example is affirmative action. Affirmative action is supposedly a bias in favor of Afro-Americans, in favor of women, in favor of Chicanos, in favor of Puerto Ricans, as opposed to the white people who are no longer being favored in that way. White people, mainly white men. Prejudice, on the other hand, is seen as this unreasoned dislike, and it is related to the question of the intent of the discriminator. Now, let's look how that actually plays out in constitutional law or employment discrimination. Unreasoned dislike. The way that's been interpreted in the cases is the following. I'm mainly going to use cases from employment discrimination, but some constitutional cases as well. Unreasoned means that the stereotype is not accurate. And Judge Posner, a gentleman on the Third Circuit, who represents the law and economics brand of thinking, has said, all right, let's define exactly what unreasoned is. Unreasoned literally means that it's an inaccurate description of the group. Now, if, however, Afro-Americans don't do as well on the LSAT, women have babies more frequently than men, and I use that now because after Rehnquist's opinion, since he says that there's no direct correlation between femininity and the ability to get pregnant, we have to at least look. We have to at least look at whether or not there is such a correlation. Now, each one of these designations then proposed are going to turn on whether the stereotype is accurate, because if it's accurate, then there's no lack of reason, and therefore it's not prejudice. We'll come back to how that connects with bias. So, for example, let's take the case Docker versus Rawlinson, in which women trying to be prison guards. This takes us to the way in which reality and morality interact together in law. Women wanted to be prison guards in Alabama. Unfortunate thing is that the whole prison system in the state of Alabama had been condemned for its inhumane violence. However, given its inhumane violence, given the fact that people who were charged with sex crimes were not separated from the other prisoners, it was decided that it was an accurate stereotype that the womanliness of a woman, putting a woman in with all these men in this inhumane environment, and you were going to have big trouble. What was the womanliness characteristic that counted? Her sex, period. That's all it was. And so on that view, it was not a quote-unquote inaccurate stereotype, therefore a prejudice. To act as if the vantage point of these men, and believe me, once you've heard the prison system in Alabama described, you feel very sorry for anybody who's in that prison system. But because it was seen as accurate, not unreasonable, it was seen as process. So that, for instance, like you want to be a senior partner at a law firm, obviously we can't be another two. But once you're a senior partner at a law firm, if you have this nice group of women here who have babies, you hire one of them, you get your baby, you get your cake and eat it too. And the baby producer, he doesn't want them paid scantily. He wants them paid on the level that the market would be willing to buy a baby. So this then would solve one of the supposed very, very troubling problems with this society. It's quote unquote smart white women aren't having babies. Now, of course, as I said, no, it doesn't totally solve its own racist dilemma, frankly, racist dilemma, because the smart white woman still wouldn't be having a baby. But then he came up with raising the level of payment for the babies were so high that maybe some women who might have been, lawyers or something truly, of course, like Posner, would now be raising. So he resolved the whole difficulty, he thinks, in terms of what? What is the difficulty? The difficulty for women entering the labor force is the following. It is that they have to meet a white male norm. Now this takes us back to bias. Is it bias in favor of women to give them maternity leave because only they need it? Is it favoring women over men? Is it favoring women over men when you recognize that they have certain quote-unquote child care responsibilities? Is it favoring women over men when we try to develop a system of health that recognizes that if there's a chemical that makes all women sterile, it isn't equality to say, guess what, girls, you can choose to be sterile just like a man when the drug or the chemical doesn't have that effect on a man? That is exactly how the other side of the argument goes. We want equality, but we can't be biased in favor of women and Afro-Americans. That would be so unfair. That's the argument against affirmative action. The argument against affirmative action is that it, quote-unquote, is biased. It favors Afro-Americans. It favors Chicanos. It favors Puerto Ricans. Now let's look at how it favors. Here you have a history that is as shocking in many ways as the Holocaust is of Afro-American slavery. I would turn you to Toni Morrison's Beloved for a brilliant description of the way in which human beings were not only exterminated systematically, but tortured on the way to their extermination. Is it biased in favor of Afro-Americans to recognize that for the first 150 years in this country, they were systematically excluded from education, systematically excluded from the labor market, and they were systematically excluded from the union, to say that history of exclusion can't just be stopped with a simple law that says we're now equal. Because the truth of the matter, when you have that history, it is absolute illusion to think that Afro-Americans have the same educational opportunities, job opportunities as white men. That's what it means to be in a school system where you have one teacher for every 90 children. Believe me, anyone who's ever tried to teach two children in a room knows the dilemma. One person with 90 is impossible. That's what it means when there is no ability now anymore to have the kinds of scholarships that were established in the 60s to see to that Afro-Americans got into college. I want to give two other examples of bias. My favorite is there was because of the systematic racial discrimination in education, there is a very progressive Afro-American educator who formed all Afro-American colleges with the idea that the only way to begin to deal with the internalization of a racist society that kept people, and Malcolm X does describe this brilliantly, when he was in the 3rd grade and he said he wanted to be a lawyer, and he was laughed at because it was ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous. If you were an Afro-American man, to be a lawyer. The most he hoped for, and of course this wasn't possible in the South because of the racist exclusion of the union, was to be a carpenter. Not that I'm knocking being a carpenter, it's a very proud profession. Malcolm X wanted to be a lawyer, and given what we thought his skills were, there was certainly every reason to think that he might have been just as good a lawyer as any other white person who was becoming a lawyer at that time. Of course, we also know that women for a long time couldn't be lawyers because of their unique female reproductive organs. As the attorney in the case of Bradwell, where it's justified as a not unreasonable prejudice against women to recognize corrupt that college. There are white people who are in that college now, the militants, sons and daughters of that. Two, this is explicit, two of the people who finally applied to that college were from families in the Ku-Klux Klan. You can see that kind of militant commitment that this kind of experiment cannot hold. That was seen as bias in favor of Afro-Americans. So here we have a whole series of cases saying anytime there's a real quote-unquote difference, then it's not prejudice. And any time that you have major attempts to correct the racism and sexism, it's bias in favor of women, it's bias in favor of minorities, and we are literally caught in a dilemma from which we cannot legally escape. The only solution, and the vision of equality is very limited to the courthouse, is quote-unquote equal opportunity, but equal opportunity in a society in which the norm is the white man. So as long as you can show that is for all practical purposes, you're a white man, you're going to be just fine. Now, when I was first a law professor, to show you how deep this is in our profession, women law professors were having trouble, quote-unquote, controlling our classes. There were 3 of us on the faculty, and it wasn't exactly a warm, embracing environment in which you felt validated. The solution of my need, I just started as a law professor, because I hadn't even started teaching yet. I'd arrived a little early because I started teaching in January, the seminar was in October, but I went with the other girl professors, deliberately, and in the seminar that had been arranged for us, we went with other law professors from other schools, he was told that in the first 30 seconds, people realize that you're not a legitimate authority because they show all these statistics that everyone thinks that a legitimate authority figure is a white man. So people prefer judges to be white men, doctors to be white men, lawyers to be white men, law professors to be white men. Because if you're not a white man, then I'm taking you serious. So that's pretty discouraging if you're not a white man, right? So you begin the seminar by being told there's no way you're going to be a legitimate authority figure. But there's hope. And the hope here was the following. You're never going to be completely able to master girlhood. But if you do as good a job as possible, for a moment, performatively, some relate to the white man. So how do you go about it? Exactly what we learned in seminar. 2 things that we need, dressing and gesturing. Now, how do you do that? Well, we can't wear a pantsuit because then you look like a lesbian, right? So that's how we're supposed to do it. And this is exactly how we're taught. You don't want to look like a lesbian, mind you. Not every bit. But what you also do want to look like is a man. How do you walk that very difficult tightrope? You get a suit that looks exactly like a man's suit with a skirt. Now, we can't wear one of these long ties, because that too is a little bit campy. But we can do it with a nice bow tie. Nothing like a nice bow tie. And then, this is very important now because, the rest of the ladies in the service, we never wear high heel shoes. And the reason, of course, is how men, well, I'm sure you've seen them, many of you probably have them now, you've logged into those giant Plunko shoes. But we can't wear those giant Plunko shoes either, because we look like we're being campy. But what we can get is a nice, sensible shoe, no high heels, no earrings, put your hair back. All right, you're not a man, but you're getting close. Then what you do, because you're wearing your flat shoes, is that you can strut into the room like a man. It's part of the problem with women law professors. We make all these validating gestures here, like you smile at me. We look you in the eye. Now, because we're wearing, and this is why we also have to wear not too tight skirts, because we now have our proper male outfit on, we too can do this for male law students, and then they'll really think we're men. Now, after all of this, and also, this is the way you're supposed to walk. You were actually walking across stages, because girls tend to walk. That doesn't do if you want to be a law professor. And because, you're now, remember, your outfit, just like when you go hiking and wear a particular outfit, you're now in your law professor outfit for the purpose of being able to put your legs up and all this. You walk like this. And if you walk like this, and then periodically put your feet up on the chair like this, stare harshly, never smile, get rid of all your girl gestures. This man was very optimistic that you could survive and control your classes as a woman law professor. I gave up after the sweating on the stage. Now, never going to be seen as prejudice to discriminate against it. And when we try to make up for the history of race and sex discrimination, it's going to be seen as bias. We're now looking at another level which makes bias and prejudice analytically difficult to be adequate to the whole struggle for equality, which is unconscious racism and sexism. I'm sure my dean thought he was doing us all a big favor by having us go to this assertiveness seminar where we could learn to look at and fool everybody to the degree that, as he said, in the end, they're still going to know you're a girl, but you're a girl that's going to be as close to a boy as possible. And that will take you a long way down the road to success as a law professor. Helena gave an example in employment discrimination the other day about how when we're in a firm, we're asked, well, how do you deal with your children? The answer can't be, well, obviously, as a woman and a mother, my child is incredibly important to me, so of course there's going to be times when I'm not going to be able to work until all hours of the night, because then I wouldn't be meeting my responsibilities as a mother. No, you say, oh, I have a kid, but it ain't any big deal. I handle it my way. And believe me, you gentlemen will never know, for all practical purposes, that I'm a mother. If you don't do that, think, for instance, if you not only said, I really have responsibility as a mother, think if you said, gosh, I'm really interested in the commitment to child rearing on the part of this firm. And I think it's a social commitment, not just me individually as a mother, because if the next generation is going to be good, there has to be people who raise children. So I want to hear what your child care policies are. I'm sure you're engaged every minute with creating new child care policies to ensure that women can enter the workforce as equal members and that mothering won't be used to discriminate against them. What do you think your chances are of being asked back to that firm? I'm sure in the simultaneous type interviews that you do where you pretend you're talking to a lawyer, and this is explicit at the University of Pennsylvania, you are not to make any feminist statements whatsoever, because a couple of students started making feminist inquiries, and they were very good students, but they weren't getting jobs. So the answer to that wasn't go to the firm and say, why on earth is it lawful to ask about child care? The answer was, tell the women students, be reasonable with them. Don't ask them to accommodate you. Now the way that's got seen in feminism is that women who say, on the one hand, they want to be lawyers, and on the other hand, they want to have child care facilities, are seen as asking providers. They're seen as, remember, wanting it both ways. If you want to be in the fire, or whatever the expression, you want to be in the frying pan, you can't jump into the fire. I never get these expressions right. But the idea is that you're supposed to be able to meet the macho standards required of you. If you're going to say women are equal, then be equal. Of course, the question becomes, equal to what? Why are norms established by the lies possible to white men in a way that are not possible to other people? What made being a white man the norm? And the other aspect of that, which I think is important, is not just actual white men who are privileged. Is it a privilege for anybody to work 18 hours a day and not be able to see their children? And indeed, one whole strand of equality in employment discrimination is what's called equality of welfare, which recognizes that men, including white men, are not simply favored by the structure that we have, but that it is in their interest too to look at how we might change law firms to have more humane policies that would allow for meaningful child care to take place at the same time that you quote-unquote rising in the ranks. So just to conclude, so you have some time for questions. What I wanted you to see is that bias and prejudice are used together as a double whammy in employment and discrimination law to create a situation in which it's perfectly okay for the discriminator to discriminate if it is in fact true that women are different. This is the problem with prejudice, the problem in the case of the woman who wanted to be a prison guard in Alabama, and at the same time that all of the attempts to quote-unquote do away structurally with racism and sexism are called bias. The example of the Afro-American college being a classic black case when there was an attempt explicitly to deal with the problem of educational deprivation, and it was seen as bias to allow it to continue favoring Afro-Americans over white men who wanted to attend that college. The only solution to this, since neither bias or prejudice reached legally the problem of unconscious motivation, in which sexism and racism is so deep in our society that we literally don't see it because it seems normal to us, is to adopt something very close to Malcolm X's view of equality, which is that it was only when every man and every woman not only had the chance to equal opportunity in a sexist racist society, which by definition is impossible, as we're seeing when we see, yes, 1/3 of all the women, all the people